Hey, just a heads up that the following content may be disturbing or triggering for some listeners and is not appropriate for children. Please take care of yourself and others who may be listening with you. Welcome to the Bonus Babies Podcast, a show that has no easy answers, only hard questions.
I just feel grateful that I get to do it. I feel grateful anytime I learn about a solution, a program that offers such a simple solution. I love that I get to have such a direct impact because I have done volunteer work in the past that has felt much more removed from the actual problem. And I feel emotionally and intellectually challenged doing this work. I feel like it really pushes me, and it's really hard sometimes. It's really hard. It can be so just emotionally just wreck me. But I wouldn't have it any other way.
Can you tell me what you call the kids who you've cared for over the years?
We feel that the children that we receive coming into our home are bonuses. So we call them bonus babies.
I love that. This is your host, Jayne Amelia Larson, and I'm a CASA, a court-appointed special advocate volunteer for youth in foster care. Yeah, I know it's a mouthful. In the same way a CASA works, I explore all things in the foster care maze by talking to kids, parents, caregivers, attorneys, social workers, therapists, really anybody and everybody who will speak to me to keep the conversation open and the information flowing about all things CASA.
Hi, this is Jake Eberly, the producer of the Bonus Babies podcast, and though we were supposed to speak with Allison Lieberman today, we have an interim special guest. Her name is Rachel Malley, and because of the amazing support of her parents and her desire to give back, she has become a CASA. Here's her story.
I'm here with Rachel Malley. Hi, Rachel. Hello.
Hi, Jane. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm here at the beach. We have some connectivity problems, but we're rooting for this to be a go. So why don't you tell me about who you are, how you were raised, what your early life was like?
Oh, wow. That's such a big question. Well, I'm a Sagittarius.
Oh, okay.
I was raised in a small town called Harvard in Massachusetts, about 40 minutes away from Boston, in a very loving home. I'm still very close with my parents, emotionally.
And I've met your parents, and I adore them. I adore them, yeah.
Wonderful people. I live about an hour away from them. I have one brother, and just had a very kind of quiet, lovely upbringing. My parents were and continue to be my biggest cheerleaders and support systems. And I think because of that, and because my mother is someone who has always been of service to her community and looked for ways to give back. They both do in different ways, but my mother has always done a lot of direct service work with the people who need it most. And I think partly because of that, and partly because my upbringing was so wonderful and stable, I always have had this desire to give back and be of service to my community and figure out how to kind of pay that. I feel so lucky that I had that upbringing, and I've always been looking for ways to pay that forward.
I think that's so wonderful, but there's a lot of people who have lovely upbringings and don't help other people. I mean, unfortunately, right?
Unfortunately. Yeah. I mean, I think, again, a lot of that comes from the way that I was raised. I mean, who knows what kind of goes into why people make those, what goes into creating a human, I've always kind of felt that way. And I've kind of gone back and forth between, do I find a career that really places that at the forefront, being of service? And a while ago, I thought that social work was going to be it for me.
Right, you
I
thought about that, and
I
then you...
thought about that. I started pursuing a master's degree in social work. And then I just, after speaking with social workers and people in that field, I saw how much burnout there is. And I got pregnant right before I started the program, and it really took a lot out of me. And I think I realized that I didn't want that for myself or my family, at least at the beginning of raising a child. So that's kind of how I fell into my work with CASA, the CASA program. Is I dropped out of that master's program and was looking for opportunities in my community to be of service. And I found out about CASA, and it just seemed like such a great way to do that without it being so all-encompassing.
Right, so how did you hear about it? It was a radio ad or something, right? Or
Something
you
like
just...
that. I had worked with a couple other organizations in Western Massachusetts where I live. And so I think I was on a newsletter for local organizations and events. And I saw it on there and just kind of reached out immediately and started, I think a month later, started my training.
Yeah.
And I was lucky that I got in. I did this in 2019 before COVID, so I got to do my training in person, which
Yeah,
was
that
great.
makes a difference, I bet, because all
Yeah.
the people that have been doing their CASA work during COVID, it must be so hard. I mean, because I also started before. I was in 2017, and I got to see my little girl right away. And a lot of the CASAs that started in COVID trained all remotely, and then really couldn't connect with their kids for quite a while. So how did you feel about the training?
I loved it. I really loved my supervisor. Unfortunately, she passed away and was replaced by another really wonderful woman who is just, she really exemplifies the CASA program. She just kind of lives and breathes CASA. She's been such a great support system, because it can be really, I mean, as you know, really challenging and emotionally draining work to do.
Yeah, it can be.
And
Yeah.
it's been, and often, and I might even say most of the time, it's not black and white. There's so many gray areas. There's very rarely a clear path forward for a lot of these kids. So it's been so nice to have a supervisor who can give support and kind of bounce ideas back and forth and validate how I'm feeling. I think that's been really, really valuable to me.
I feel the same way about my supervisor, and also all of the staff at CASA of Los Angeles, and all the leadership. I mean, I've learned so much. I feel it's made me a better person, but also a smarter person about how to be a better CASA. They set really good examples. So I hope that's true all over the country. I think it does vary from county to county and state to state, but overall, I think it's a really successful program. So can you tell me a little bit about your case? Because yours a really complicated case, actually.
Very complicated. So I was assigned to my case in November of 2019, and it's 3 siblings. And it was really challenging to wrap my head around the case at the beginning, because there are 4 parents among the 3 children.
Wow.
2 of them share a father and 2 of them share a mother, but they were all living together.
All living together?
They were all
Yeah.
living together with one of the fathers, and then he was arrested, so the children were removed. So with all those parents came a boatload of attorneys and caseworkers, and being a new CASA, that was kind of challenging to get accustomed to. Who do you call to find out certain information? And you know,
like
it's
who has that
confusing.
information?
Who has the information? And I went to the courthouse and looked at their old, court documents, and they had kind of a long history of being removed and then placed with different parents and family members. And what was also really challenging was that there were so many contradictory stories coming from the adults I knew someone was lying.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was really hard to navigate. But the kiddos were just so sweet, and poor things were just bounced all over the place. And luckily, two of the children who share a mother were placed back with their mother in early 2021. So about, a year and a half after I was assigned to the case.
Right. So how did that work out? How did she get them back?
So she was just one of these really picture perfect parents who followed her DCF service plan to the letter. She worked so hard. She did all of the classes and all of the trainings and always showed up for her visits on time. She was so diligent, and it was a long road for her, but I'm so proud of her, and was so frustrated for her because a lot of the roadblocks to getting her kids back had more to do with DCF red tape than what she was actually doing.
I think it's really important for people to hear this because it's so not easy to get your kids back. Even if you do everything right, it takes so long, and there's so many jumps, there's so many hoops that the parents have to jump through. They have to do it all on their own. Very often they get almost no help, and yet they still manage to hang in there and get their kids. And she's one of those.
Yep, she was one of those. She was one of the, I don't want to say lucky because that would diminish the work that she put into it. But I don't think that the parents who aren't able to get their kids back, I don't think of them as being bad people. They're just not in a place. They're not in the right place for it. And she was ready to make changes in her life. And so towards the end, she had completed everything. And the one thing that was standing in her way of getting her two children back was that she needed, according to DCF policy, she needed to have a bedroom for each child. And the housing market around here is really, really rough for renters. And she was trying to apply for Section 8 housing assistance and needed help from DCF to do that, but it was really confusing about if she needed it before getting their help. It was all very confusing. It was hard to get in touch with DCF because they're so overloaded and have so many different cases that they're trying to stay on top of. So finally, I believe it was our local juvenile court judge is just this amazing woman.
Yeah, and a really good judge, right? Yeah.
She's great. She's very stern but fair. And I've seen her a couple times kind of cut through red tape, unnecessary red tape, to just make things happen. She's not someone that will just kind of see what happens. She wants to actually make things happen immediately. So I think she ended up stepping in and getting the policy waived so that this mother could take her children, so that the children could move back in with her right away while she was looking for housing.
Well, that's just excellent because a 3-bedroom apartment for a young mom, for any young mom, would be exorbitant.
Yep.
And kind of unrealistic, actually.
Right. Yeah, we were talking about that last time we spoke. Most people wouldn't be able to do that. A lot of families aren't able to have a bedroom for each of their children, but that's fine. It works. And so it's these kind of ridiculous, like you said, completely unreasonable roadblocks that often get in the way. So that was kind of frustrating to see. And luckily, they're all doing really well.
Right. And you're in touch with them still, right?
I'm in touch with them still. And then the third child has been the most challenging. He was about 3 or 4 when I first got on the case, which is a challenge in itself because the point of CASA is to advocate for the best interest of the child, right? And part of that is having conversations with the child and asking them what they want. And often what children want is in line with their best interest, but not always. Because usually the children just want to be with their parents, but that's not always the thing that's best for them. So that's kind of the interesting, I'm curious about if you have found this to be true. That's been a really interesting fine line that you have to walk as a CASA.
Yes, it has been true for me in my work as a CASA and for almost every other CASA that I know.
Mm-hmm.
You have to pay attention to the child and hear the child. But what the child wants is not necessarily the best thing for the child.
Right.
And and it's sometimes really, really tough, exactly as you said. For instance, a kid might want to just go home to his parents no matter how bad it is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not always the best thing for the kid. And sometimes it's better for them to be in a happy and healthy environment that they can learn to be comfortable in. It's always really, really hard. I mean, it's hard no matter what.
It's so hard. And for this youngest child, he was bounced around a lot of different foster homes because of his behavior, and finally landed in a foster home with a foster mother who ended up keeping him for about 2 years, I believe. Through all of his challenging behaviors, she was really a saint and didn't want to give up on him and worked so hard. And she was really the one that I built a relationship with because she just had was able to provide the best overview and the details of his day-to-day existence there and how things were going and how his communications with his parents were going. And he was one of those kids who just wanted to be with his parents, but that was not the best. It wasn't possible for him. So this does have a very happy ending, but it was a really difficult road for him. His foster mother gave notice because he was starting to exhibit behavior that was just too much for her. And
right,
she
it
had
was
to
scaring
protect
her. Right.
Yeah, and she had to protect the other foster children that were in her home. But luckily, a family member kind of came out of the woodwork and said that she would take him. And after a long kind of bureaucratic road, she was able to get temporary guardianship, and it was going really well. And then there's always this honeymoon period for kids when they transition into a new home where it goes really well for a week or two. And then the testing starts. And, this poor child has been moved around so much that he kind of grew to understand that adults would eventually give up on him. So I think I'm totally projecting this on him, but it makes sense that he would start to act up and push the boundaries and see what would happen. And it involved a hospital visit because they were worried about his mental health. And I was in touch with his guardian a lot throughout that. And she really stuck with him. She stayed in the hospital with him for about a week and just didn't give up. But she also very firmly advocated for his well-being and to get him help. She was like, this child needs help and I can't do it alone. I need help.
Right. And what was his diagnosis? Because didn't he have reactive attachment disorder? That was not discovered until later?
It wasn't, which is baffling to me because he had, been, I think he had been given a psych eval in the past, but they finally...
Right. Can you explain that to me, how that exhibits?
I'd have to look up. I mean, basically, reactive attachment disorder, and this is going to be from someone who is not a professional, but my understanding of it is that it presents in children who did not have an opportunity to build a secure attachment with an adult or multiple adults growing up. As a young child, as a toddler, I think are kind of those years in which it really needs to happen. So the way that it presents in this child is sometimes violent behavior, hurting himself and others, kind of seemingly out of nowhere. Lying, I think, is a part of it. I would have to look up the other.
Well, you're actually on it so far. It's that they because of the inability to. This is my understanding too, also from a total layman's
Yeah.
POV, that because a kid has not formed a healthy attachment, they have all this acting out behavior that actually makes it worse for them because
Right.
they can't connect because they're afraid of connecting because they haven't been able to connect. And then it's easy to for it to seem like they're pushing you away when actually they just
Right.
haven't learned how to connect.
Right. Yeah, and I think it also would just baffle his guardians, and they wouldn't really understand what was happening, or it's easy to kind of just, say, oh, he's just a challenging kid. But I think I am so impressed by how his current guardian really advocated for him, because she knew that something was going on, and she knew that he needed to get a psych eval and be put on medication, and that was the result of the diagnosis, was that he was put on medication that helped level him out. Because I think that his life was very uncomfortable, just so many ups and downs, really hard for him to regulate his emotions and his body. Like, he would just throw himself around and had a really hard time calming down. So I think that getting put on this medication just helped him find some peace. And ever since then, it's not like it was like that, but and everything's great, but it helped him be able to better work with his teachers and the support staff at his school and his guardian to come up with some rituals and routines that help him get through the day.
Right. And you mentioned something when we spoke earlier about that you were kind of surprised at the lack of communication between caregivers, even when a kid is moved, or and how did that happen with this kid?
So in this case, and I'll just go back a little bit, throughout this entire case, it's gone on for about 3 years. So we've had about 3 or 4 different DCF caseworkers assigned to the children.
Okay, straight away. So there's not one person that has
Right.
a sense of the history, right?
Exactly. So I kind of naively thought that anytime a new caseworker came on, that they would get a really thorough report of what had been going on. But now I understand that even if they had, there so many things have happened that it's more about the personal relationships that are formed over time, and these kind of in-between moments, and the anecdotal information, I think, which is what CASA really gets. We really get to know all of the different players, and that is a little bit more nuanced and a little bit harder to communicate between caseworkers. So I often would assume that something was being communicated to a guardian when it wasn't. So when this child went to the hospital, I was talking to his guardian, and I asked her if she had received previous reports about his visits to the doctor and diagnoses, and he has a whole list of allergies. And according to her, no one had given her these reports.
So she didn't get any of that when he arrived at her home.
Right.
She didn't have any of the information of what had happened to him in the past.
Exactly. She didn't get,
Okay.
and I don't know if she was even allowed to get these things, but I would have thought that it would be helpful for her to get the reports written by his previous foster mother, because she had been with him for 2 years. So she wrote down all of these behaviors, all of the instances that this child exhibited, very similar to behavior to what this new guardian was experiencing. So I had to tell her, everything that you're experiencing right now, I have seen happen to a different extent, but multiple times over the past 3 years. And it always happens right after some sort of transition, or after the child has seen one of his parents, which for him was really disruptive. And I think, or I hope, that helped the guardian understand that this was a pattern, and that it didn't necessarily have anything to do with her or how well he could fit in her home, but that it was a pattern that needed to be understood and maybe even addressed.
Very, 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 very important. And I think that's probably true for most cases. I think because there are so many kids and they get moved and moved and moved. They have many caseworkers, sometimes many attorneys. In LA, it happens that there's many judges. So in your case, your kids have had one judge, the same judge the whole time, which I found like astounding, because there's so many judges in LA. There's floors and floors of courtrooms just at the children's court. And I don't know how many judges, probably 50. I mean, I have to find out. But so, and they hear all different cases all the time. And they're still really good at what they do.
Right.
And it's pretty amazing. You said something about what you thought makes for a better CASA, and you said compassion and frustration. So can you tell me what that means to you?
Well, I've consistently found myself oscillating between those two emotions. I have gotten so frustrated with the type of bureaucracy and red tape that we've discussed, but I have so much compassion for the DCF caseworkers who are just buried. They're just drowning in cases.
They are.
And,
they are. They really
and
are.
They have to deal with just so much hate. These poor social workers that went into the field because they wanted to help people, and they're working within a system that is very imperfect, and they're just tired, and they're trying their best. And then so I have that compassion, and I think that that's really necessary. But also, to be a CASA, you have to put that to the side a little bit, because at the end of the day, you have to fight for your kid. And sometimes that might mean calling the DCF supervisors over and over.
Over and over. That's what I did.
Or finding different channels, figuring out different ways to solve problems. And I think that that's one thing that's, I'm sure, so frustrating for caseworkers, is that they are required to work within this system. And obviously, as CASAs, we have, a framework, and we can't just do whatever we want, but we have a lot more freedom in our options. So I really feel for them. I know that it must be really frustrating for them when they see a parent trying so hard and running up against, these roadblocks, but I feel like there's not often anything that they can really do about it. So yeah, that's where CASAs come in, right? Just being able to think outside of the box. And one of my favorite things is just writing reports in preparation for court appearances and testifying, and being able to paint a picture of what's going on so that the judge can read about it ahead of time and know on a personal level what's happening, instead of just reading a factual report or a more black and white report. I think CASAs can be a little bit more nuanced in how they report.
Right. And so Yeah. So, what was the first time like for you, where you spoke in court,
Oh, what was the first time like?
or just one important time, if you don't
Well,
remember the
it's
first time?
mostly been, I think I've only ever testified over Zoom because
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
But that
yeah,
counts.
I
That
don't think I
counts. Yeah.
ever had to go into the court. So in that way, it's been a little bit less intimidating. And like you said, the judge in our city, small city, is just so wonderful. And she's very supportive of the CASA program. So she always makes sure that the CASA has an opportunity to speak. And I think she has made some decisions kind of based off of my recommendations, not solely based off
They
of it, but
do.
I think that she
Mm-hmm.
lets that be a factor in the decisions that she makes, which I just think is really great. But it can be a little bit intimidating being in a room with a bunch of attorneys uh, and this judge who I'm a little bit intimidated by her because she's so amazing, she's so great, but
Right.
yeah, she
She's so
is,
on
but
it, right? Yeah.
I love it. I think it's really fun testifying. It feels like such an honor to be able to kind of speak for these children.
I felt that way too, and I also felt like the judge really heard me.
Mm,
I remember thinking, well, I remember my first time because my courts were in person at the beginning because it was really pre-COVID.
hmm.
Reason why you're not in person is because of COVID. So my first times in court were in person, and I didn't know who was who, and there's so many people, and there's so many attorneys, and who's that person, and
Hmm.
who's that new person, and I didn't even know what was going on. And then at some point, I hear my name, and I think, oh, okay, they know who I am. Okay, great. And then I had to introduce myself so that it's in the court record. You report that you're there, and then the judge called on me, and I was a little bit like, but then I just spoke my truth. Based on my observations,
Hmm.
and she listened. She
Mm,
really listened, and I had been told that happens, but that was
mm,
really true in my case. I think depending on the nature of the case and how busy the judge is and how much prep time they have, each experience can be different because they're hearing case after case after
hmm.
case after case. So at least that's the way it is in Los Angeles. They're reading as you're talking.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty amazing what they do. But I also felt the same way. They really want to hear from the CASA because they know that the CASA is the hub of
Mm,
information. And also, I'm sure in your court reporting, we are encouraged to be as objective as possible.
right.
So it's pretty straight. And that was a little difficult for me to do because I am a
Right.
creative writer, so I really had to learn how to just the facts, ma'am,
Right.
kind of like that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that has been a little bit of a challenge for me as well. But I think that I've also found that within that structure, we're still providing something that's more personal than anyone else can because we're talking to everyone.
I
And
agree.
because we don't have an agenda,
I agree. Yep.
like we just want what's
Yeah.
best for these kids. And I'm not saying that DCF doesn't want that, but it definitely is different and so needed. It's just we need more
We need
CASAs.
more CASAs. We really do. We need less kids in care, and we need more CASAs.
Hmm.
So, can you tell me about how you feel about the work that you're doing? How do you feel about how does it make you feel about
Mm.
yourself?
I just feel grateful that I get to do it. I feel grateful anytime I learn about a solution, a program that offers such a simple solution. I love that I get to have such a direct impact because I have done volunteer work in the past that has felt much more removed from the actual problem. And I feel emotionally and intellectually challenged doing this work. I feel like it really pushes me, and it's really hard sometimes. It's really hard. It can be so just emotionally just wreck me. But I wouldn't have it any other way. It definitely has been hard doing this during COVID because I haven't been able to see the kids in person, especially since I have a young child. So we've been more,
You have to be careful. Yeah.
more careful, and also trying to figure out schedules with foster parents. It's tough. And so I'm excited now that the kids are with their guardians. I'm hoping to go visit them in person this summer and kind of see the results of those 3 years that they went through. And I just played a small part in that. I think CASA is very important, but I know that it was the result of the efforts of all of the caseworkers and attorneys and foster parents and the guardians that fought for these kids. And it's really just such an amazing thing to be a part of.
I feel the same way. So. Can you tell me a little bit about your work with Ty Jackson? Because I know you find that also really rewarding. How did that happen, and what are you doing?
Sure. So I met Ty Allan Jackson several years ago. He is a children's book author in my town, and we met while I was pursuing my master's in social work, and we just started talking one day about a class I was taking, and he asked me to come to his office and talk to him about maybe working for him. And it's been 4.5 years, and now I'm a partner in the company, and we sell books that feature children of color, characters of color in really fun contemporary stories, so that children of color get to see themselves represented in the same way that white children get to see when they read novels.
Mm-hmm.
And Ty is just this amazing motivational speaker for kids, and he gets to travel now all around the country visiting kids, and
And he's done 3 TED Talks, which is kind of amazing.
He's done three TEDx Talks, mm-hmm. and he can talk to any crowd and get them excited. He's just a real presence, and he has this amazing story where he grew up with his mom had him when she was 15. He grew up in the projects in the Bronx. His father was in and out of jail for his whole childhood, and I think that really formed him into the person that he is today. He's such a hard worker. He works more than anyone I know. And books were always a big part of his upbringing. And I think when he actually didn't start writing until he was in his 40s, because his child asked him if he could open up a lemonade stand. And so they did, and they made $50. And his son asked him, "What do I do with this?" And Ty didn't know, so he went to Barnes and Noble to try and find a book to teach kids about money, and he couldn't find one. And he also couldn't find very many children's books featuring children of color in a contemporary light. It was all, Underground Railroad and civil rights mm-hmm. books. So he left the store and came up with the idea for his first book, Danny Dollar, in that parking lot. And then a year later, had this book. It's called Danny Dollar Millionaire Extraordinaire, and it teaches kids about money, and since then has spawned a financial literacy program through the Federal Reserve of Cleveland. It's been turned into a play. We've sold over 100,000 copies of the book.
Wow.
And he has a second financial literacy book called Make Your Own Money, and a superhero series as well. And we just have so much fun. We are the luckiest people in the world. We have the best job. We get to promote literacy and get kids excited about reading. It's the best.
But what I also hear is that it's like you and he, but it's like you're creating your luck too. It's not like
Yeah.
falling in your lap. You're making it happen.
That's a nice way. I love that. I think that's very true. I think that it's yes, and it's both. I feel like I am a very lucky person, but I'm not wasting that luck.
Right.
I'm trying to put it to good use, because otherwise, what's the point? But I just I feel lucky that I can support Ty in this mission that he's been on for over 10 years. And yeah, it's really fun. And it feels like it's what I have always been looking for, which is a way to do something that I care about and that I feel like is really important, a way to be of service, but not burn out, and be able to turn my brain off at the end of the day and be with my family, and not kind of get sucked into the doom of everything that's wrong in the world.
I know, and it's easy to get sucked into that, for sure.
It really is.
Yeah. So I want to ask you something that I ask all my guests, and if you can dig deep for this. What is the one thing that no one would ever know about you unless you told them?
I don't think that anyone except for my partner, my life partner, would know that I've struggled a lot with anxiety and depression. Because I've always been very, even and this kind of happy person. But I think especially with the pandemic, it's been really hard. I've really been struggling with anxiety, and I live in the Northeast, so seasonal depression is real. And I even brought this up with my parents recently, and they were surprised because
Yeah.
I'm good at hiding it. I guess
You're really good at hiding it. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm also I am getting better at talking about it, and realizing that hiding it isn't doing me any favors. So I'm kind of working towards addressing it and developing some tools to help myself, because there's what's the point?
I want to thank you for sharing that, because that's true for me too. Sometimes in the morning, I have to just talk myself out of catastrophizing everything. I get super anxious. I don't know. It happens for me in the early morning, and so I've been trying to figure out ways to really just deal with it, because I don't want to live my life anxiously. I want to live it fully.
Doesn't have to be that way. What have been some of the tools that you've discovered? Anything?
Yeah, I have a meditation app that I use, that as soon as I start to feel that feeling happen, I turn it on, and my partner is next to me in the bed, and I said, "Can I turn on my meditation app?" And he says, "Of course you can." And he listens to it too. And a lot of the ones, it has actually a bunch of courses on it. There's programs, and a lot of them address anxiety, but sometimes I just play other ones, like ones that have to do with self-compassion or self-care. Or,
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, because we do need to take care of ourselves, or we can't do the CASA work.
Exactly.
That's one thing they really stress is learning how to take care of yourself.
Yeah. I think that there is a whole range of tools to be had, and it's such a personal journey.
Yes.
But I think it is really, I think the best place to start is just talking about it.
Yes.
Hearing, it always helps me anytime I hear that someone else is struggling with this. And I think it's becoming more and more common for people to talk about their mental health struggles. And thank goodness for that, because especially through this pandemic, I think anxiety has been at an all-time high.
Yes.
So, we all need the the support and ideas for how to create these mental health toolboxes for ourselves.
I want to thank you so much, Rachel, for speaking to me. You're a lovely woman, and I'm honored to get to know you for a little bit, really.
Oh, thank you, Jayne. This has been such a pleasure, and I love this podcast and what you're doing. It's really wonderful. Please keep it up, because people need to hear about
I'm trying.
this whole world.
I'm in there. I'm in the trenches doing it. So.
Yeah, you're doing it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Rachel, for being a part of the community to give back. What you do is valued and very important. So thank you. And next week, we'll be hearing from Allison Lieberman. She's a marriage and family therapist who worked in emergency shelters and residential facilities with foster youth, and now treats moms adjusting to motherhood, with a specialty in postpartum anxiety. See you next week, and be well. If you see something, say something. If you suspect a child's health or safety is jeopardized in any way by parents or anyone else, contact the Child Protective Services Agency in your county. 24-hour hotlines are staffed by trained social workers who will help you through the process, and you can do so anonymously. In California, you can call the Child Protection Hotline at 800-540-4000. So if you see something, say something. You might be saving a child's life. If you want to know more about becoming a CASA anywhere in the country, go to nationalcasagal.org, and in LA, casala.org. And if you want to know more about becoming a foster parent, check out the National Foster Parent Association at nfponline.org. There's also faithfosterfamilies.org and adoptuskids.org. There's tons of other information online as well, so you can just hunt around. We also want to thank the supremely talented Christina Apostolopoulos for her beautiful original music. You can find her music on Spotify or Instagram at Christina Aposto. And also thank you to Yukon Har for his engineering. Thanks for listening, and if you like what you hear and you find it as valuable as we do, please rate us and hit subscribe. You can also make a donation at bonusbabies.org. See you next time.